So let's take a moment, let's pray together. Father, Lord, we just take a deep breath. So many things that come up in our day from the moment we wake up, demands, surprises. Lord, thank you that we can be together right now here. We just thank you for breath, for life. And that when we breathe in, we can feel your presence even that much more. We can recognize that we're not alone, that we are with us, that you are leading us, that you're giving us perspective, peace, confidence, courage to face whatever comes in our day. We can do it because we know you're with us. That's your promise. So we just open ourselves to you, to your spirit, to the things that Stephen has prepared for us today. And give us ears to hear what you would want to say to us, that would be in alignment to the things you're already doing in our lives. So we just surrender ourselves to you. We thank you for Stephen. We pray you give him the words to speak today. Give him joy as he shares things that you have given to him, lessons that he's learned, things that he has found useful, where we just receive it from him as we receive it from you. And we just pray this in your powerful, very good name. Amen.
Well, thank you. It is truly an honor to be able to be with you this morning. I'm going to start sharing my screen here. Let's see here. Let's see if I can. You all seeing that now, the art of leading? Perfect. Okay. So I want to begin simply by saying that my intent with this is maybe a little bit of a different style than what you sometimes might see in a classic kind of presentation. My objective this morning is to acknowledge that all of us bring our own layers and beautiful learning with us into a space like this. And so we all have learned things, have wisdom, have insights, all those kind of things that are a part of our lives. And so I feel like my role this morning is to be more of a facilitator of what I hope is going to be a really powerful, healthy dialogue and conversation together this morning, so that we all get to kind of participate in sharing and our shared wisdom with each other. What I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce an idea, and then I'm going to bring, of course, all of who I am into the dialogue and into the conversation. But I really want you to bring yourself into the dialogue and the conversation as well. So again, don't hesitate to use the chat box, jump in, unmute yourself, just, don't be afraid about like, oh, I don't want to interrupt him. No, please. That's what we want to do this morning. So you're welcome to do that. But what I want to do is I want to introduce to us this idea that leadership, if you Google leadership, there's just an unbelievable amount of things that will pop up, all different kinds of ideas, styles, all those kind of things. And really, ultimately, I think of leadership from a perspective that's more of, it's like an art, and there's no way to like ever fully like delineate it or boil it down into just a formula. Like that just is almost an impossible thing. So that's why I'm really drawn to this metaphor of juggling, because it does feel a bit more like there's this process of, I'm always trying to kind of figure out what needs my attention when, and which person do I need to give myself to in this moment, and all those kind of things. So the metaphor of the juggler really, really resonates with me. And so we're just kind of going to run with that this morning, thinking that the art of leading is helping us all just to be better jugglers. So with that in mind, what I want to do is I want to this morning introduce a singular topic to us about what it means for us to be culture creators. Now, this is a part of a bigger 5-session program that I have put together, and I'll tell you more about that. But this is essentially just the first session of a 5-session piece that I have. But it's the big rock piece. It's the first lead off piece that I think is so critical to the art of leading, and that is that we as leaders, I believe, are constantly creating culture. Now, let's start with a statement. Every leader is creating a culture for their team or their organization, whether they want to or not. And now here's your first opportunity to jump in. Do you agree or disagree, and why? Why do you agree or disagree? So I'm really curious what your initial thoughts are on this opening idea.
I agree. This is Eloise, and the reason why
Great.
the reason why I agree is because we set the tone. So the expectations are set by us, and the culture of the organization is developed under that. That's my feedback.
So good. So good. I love that. I love that word tone. It's really good. Other ideas?
This is Garrett from Arizona Life Coalition. I think it's commonly understood that leaders are supposed to lead and set strategy and create strategy. But I once heard a football coach, or saw a sign in the football locker room that said, "Culture always beats strategy." And so I think you're making a great point that as leaders,
Right.
we need to set and lead the culture as well as the strategy.
Right. Yeah, good. Good. Any other thoughts? Thanks, John. I see that. Vision, tone, behaviors all set the culture. Absolutely. Good.
Yeah, I'll
Well,
jump in. Go ahead, Kathy.
Kathy from Biblical Counseling of Arizona.
Great.
One of the things, if any of us have listened to that amazing Mars Hill podcast from Christianity Today, we saw a culture of bullying in the church, and that made a big difference, and that gave me a perspective that I hadn't seen in the world at that time. So
yeah, well,
I agree.
wow. Appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. This is Heather. Hey, I'm looking at this saying, I totally agree. Coming from a family where there was some alcoholism involved, I became really aware that people are often looking at whatever environment they're in and trying to figure out how to function. And so if you're figuring out how to function, whether it's out of a need for survival or trying to fit in or trying to succeed, whatever the motivation, you're looking at the people at the top to figure out how to function. And so therefore you're creating culture because you want to succeed, you want to survive in all of those motivations.
Yeah, so good. So good. So here's then my basic premise, right? It feels like we have consensus in the room this morning that being a culture creator is a really, really critical factor in the art of leading, which then presupposes this next thing, which is what I want to spend the rest of the time talking about, which is this. I think there's a way for us to be then intentional about the kind of culture that we're going to create in our teams and our organizations. And I want to introduce to you the idea that the culture that we most want to try and produce is a culture of what I call withness. So it's a culture that then communicates, we are in this together. Now, this flies in the face of some ideas of leadership, which are based more on power and control, and that are based more on hierarchical positioning, right? There's the idea of authoritative power, which is I have the power just because of what my position is. And I can create a culture that way, which we just heard about an illustration from the whole Mars Hill thing a second ago, right? Or I can have relational authority, right? So this idea of withness is based on the idea of leading from a place of relational authority. So what I would like to suggest to us today and have us talk about the rest of the morning then is how can we work at being leaders who intentionally work to create this culture of withness, this culture that says, I'm in this with you. I'm not over you. I'm with you in this. It's a change in posture. It's not over, it's beside. Now, that doesn't eliminate, let me say right off the bat, it doesn't eliminate that sometimes as a leader, you have to make decisions that are over, right? Because you're in a position where you still have to make decisions of what this is the way we're going to do things, because that's just what we have to do, right? Like, so it doesn't completely eliminate that, but there is a posture that you can have that even when you have to exert that authoritative power, you're doing it within a culture of withness that you've already created. Let's head now into the next piece, which is, I want to talk then about 3 facets of what I consider to be the culture of withness. The first one is making our culture safe. So question 1, what do you think are the qualities and characteristics of a safe space and or a safe team? What do you think safety looks and feels like? Let's help teach each other for a little bit.
Yeah, and Eloise, let me say one thing. Yeah, jump in like Eloise is doing, and all of you feel free to put in the chat as well, because there's a lot of us. We'd love to hear it. So type some of your thoughts in the chat as well. But go ahead, Eloise.
I'm sorry, it takes me too long to pull it up and to type. When it comes to my mind, I just want to open my mouth.
That's great. I love it.
So when I think safe, I'm thinking of a place where I can feel comfortable coming to that individual. I won't be attacked. I feel safe, if that makes sense. A culture where I feel like I can just tell that person anything.
Awesome. So there's a comfortability and you feel protected.
Yes. And not threatened.
Awesome. Cool. What else?
I think
Deborah,
just the freedom. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I feel like the freedom to be completely honest, and just like that freedom of being able to come to one another and have that, just the freedom of honesty is huge.
Awesome. I love it.
I would add keeping confidences secure.
Ooh. Okay, great.
So that when you tell something that you're just simply struggling with, just as a person, that you are in that safe space to where there won't be gossip and slander, but someone to help you work through it.
So good. Yeah, appreciate that.
Some great responses on the chat. So freedom to fail, vulnerability from everyone, thinking the best in each other, creating a culture of the team can rumble through hard situations.
Bridget's been reading some Brene, apparently, I think, maybe, huh? Yeah.
Yes, I have.
Awesome.
I love her stuff. And I'm going to do the book study, Rising Strong, with my team, just so we can have all the same language. So, yeah.
Very cool. That's great. Yeah, that's a fantastic resource. Really good. Yeah. So what role do you think, if this is sort of what a safe environment, a safe space feels like, then we press this just one more layer down and say, what role does a good leader play in helping to create that safety? Now, I think we already got one example that came to us from Kathy when she said the idea of holding confidence, right? How do you think a leader holds confidence and helps cultivate a culture that holds confidence well? Let's lean into that a little bit, because I think that's a really, really critical piece in here. Kathy, I don't know if you want to speak to that, since you're the one that kind of illustrated that, but from a leader's perspective, how do you approach that, and how do you set the tone of confidence keeping in your team?
Setting the tone of confidence keeping in my team is even telling them, or even asking, is this something that you want to keep between you and I? Asking them that question, and then verifying that this will be kept in confidence.
So good. Yeah. Sometimes we have to actually get explicit with that, right? As opposed to just assuming that, right? Like when you're going to say this and I'm going to assume that whether I'm supposed to hold it or not, sometimes creating that space of confidentiality actually has to be very directive, right? This is how we are going to handle these kind of things as a team. One of the frameworks that I use in a number of settings that I work in is I approach this from the idea of the stories that we tell, right? And that I'll tell people, I'm always free to tell my story, and you're always free to tell your story to whoever you want. But please let me tell my story, and my story isn't your story to tell, right? And when I use that language with people, it's really interesting how quickly that begins to reinforce that idea of confidentiality. It's, wait, is this my story to tell, or is this somebody else's story? And if it's somebody else's story, oh, well, then let's let them tell that story if they want to tell that story, right? Because that's a big caveat there. Other thoughts on what role a good leader plays in helping create this culture of safety in this context of witness?
I think it goes back to, like, I'm going to bring Brene back into it, but I love how she talks about the story I'm telling myself. So like, just when there is that conversation and you're having to, confront somebody or just have that hard conversation and you want it to be a safe spot, just the story I'm telling myself is this, but it might not be what reality is. And so verifying with the reality of the team member, if that's their reality.
So good. So good. Appreciate that feedback. Thanks, Bridget. So let me ask. Oh, go ahead, Heather. Sorry.
I was reading another book, and they were talking really about the idea of gentle protectors. And so, if and when something becomes unsafe in the group, it's how does the leader respond to an unsafe environment? Do they not do anything, or do they become a gentle protector? So, you don't attack the people that are being unsafe, but you also protect the people around them. So having that model, I would say, is another significant way I feel safe.
Yeah, that's fantastic. In fact, that's where I was going next, was the idea that as I think an effective leader, when there are things that are happening among the team that aren't safe, actually leads by confronting those unsafe things and naming it, but then also saying, and here's what we're going to do instead. Here's the different pathway we're going to take rather than this pathway that we did take, right? And I love that language. What book is that from? Gentle Protectors, Heather? Be a great resource for us to share. Do you remember?
I think under Rare Leadership it's the book called Rare Leadership.
Cool. Okay. Awesome. That's great. I'll offer one other idea that I think fits in this from the person who's trying to help be the culture creator here. And that is, if I actually have to do some of that gentle correcting or that gentle protecting, my ability to do as much of that as I can privately and not in front of the team is actually one of those things that is a small decision, but I think makes a big impact on the witness factor. Because what you're doing in that is you're reinforcing, I'm not going to call you out in a shaming or blaming way in front of others, right? If I need to actually come with some corrective action, I'm going to try and do that as much as possible in a private one-on-one setting, because then I have the ability to not have the eyes and ears of everybody else pile on and ultimately create the possibility of even a bigger shame storm. Does that making sense to everybody? Anybody have thoughts on that one? All right, so we've got creating a culture that's safe is our first sort of framework for creating a witness culture. And in that, we've talked about helping people to hold confidence, creating a culture of holding confidence. We've talked about maybe gentle protection and confronting when necessary things that are unsafe, but doing that in ways that aren't shaming to others in front of others, and that we're going to try and do that as much as we can in private. So there's some practical handles that we've talked about. Any final thoughts on that before we move to the next piece? Awesome. All right, you're ready for more. Let's do it. So we want to make our culture safe. And then I also think what we want to do is we want to make our culture open. I think a culture that has a sense of withness about it has a sense of openness to it. So first question, what do you think I mean by the idea of an open culture, and why do you think that is important?
Question, what do you mean by open?
Yeah, so when you think of an open culture, a culture that has an openness that's a part of it, what's your first sort of blink idea behind that? I'm just curious about what your thought is of what you think I might be trying to say there.
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is like if I started a new job with a company in corporate America, they have this open door policy. So that's
okay.
The first thing, thinking that I can come to them at any time.
Okay.
That's what came to my mind, but I'm sure that's not what you're talking about.
Well, that may be. We'll see in a second, I think. So yeah, that's good. Awesome. Okay. Other ideas of what you think an open culture is?
Not seeing anything in the chat either. We might be a little.
That's okay.
Oh, here
Oh,
comes
sorry.
Lydia.
I think maybe like the word that comes to mind for me is transparency.
Okay, good,
Yeah,
good.
just have a culture of transparency and openness.
Excellent, good.
And maybe too, Stephen, it could be, it's so apparent about the culture. Strangers, when they walk in, they can see the culture.
Good. Yeah, I like it. Good.
Yeah, Minnie built on that. And Minnie is saying, yeah, that in addition, if a safety has been built, then that opens up the door for people to share their ideas so that you can be more collaborative.
Awesome. Great. So here's where I'm headed with this, and you're already all ahead of me, which is fantastic, right? I think that there's this sense of a great leader who is creating a culture of witness is a leader who is approachable. And the open door, right? Sometimes these metaphors and these, things stick around because they are helpful, actually, right? So I really do think there is something to be said for that idea of the metaphor of the open door. Now, I think we have to be really careful about that because you can go too far. You can be we all know people who are way too open, right?
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Where it's like, you know what? I really do not care what you had for breakfast this morning. Right? I mean, I'm so glad you enjoyed your eggs and bacon or whatever, but I did not need that, and that's probably mild, right? Because the people who are too open, they usually tell us way, 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 way too much, right? But what I'm thinking about in terms of this openness is that they feel like they can come to you and they can come in a place of vulnerability, right? So approachability means that what I'm doing is I'm cultivating a culture that says that you are safe to come here and be vulnerable with me, right? That's to me what that approachability is. So how do you think we go about that process of being approachable? What ideas come to your mind with that? I like John's comment in the chat about the Patrick Lencioni's The Healthy Conflict, right? The ability to discuss and even disagree. Excellent. Yeah, for sure.
When I think about being approachable, I guess I think about like giving them quality time. And so, putting the phone down when they're talking, or not doing emails when they're talking, and just sitting, side, not across, but kind of side by side, and just being that, so you're not like, I'm on the other side of the desk while you're over there. So just creating that approachability through eye contact and all those things.
Yes, there's a presentness, there's an attention that we give, right? Like that creates that approachability. So good.
Yeah, that's what
listening to, and not fixing, just like sometimes we're just there to listen.
Look at you. You're to see, this is why I say my job here is just to help facilitate an awesome conversation, because you all are experts in many ways already, right? There's this real listening is huge in this process, isn't it? Right. What's rolling in the chat there for us, Heather?
Yeah, lots of great input there. I mean, Krishna just jumped on that same idea of undivided attention. So that when someone comes forward, their body language is even saying, I'm available, so my attention's here, my body's here, I'm fully present. Mandy, being vulnerable creates that environment of openness. So being able to even start a conversation, not with your strength, but maybe your weakness or a need, or I'm curious what you think, opening the door.
Yeah.
I need help with this. Jeffrey saying, being fully present, so critical.
Right.
John adding equality versus status. So looking at an approachable leader doesn't just pull back into his authority or position to disengage.
Right.
Oh, rich, John. Yeah, and I was thinking that similarly, that when there is a differing opinion, an approachable leader feels as though they're willing, they're curious about what I'm seeing rather than defensive. So if I'm being that way as a leader, I want to know, what does the person mean? Tell me more. I'm interested in what you're seeing rather than defending or disregarding.
Yes. Yeah. There really is a power in the curiosity factor here as a leader, right? Of leaning in. And I love John, you're highlighting again, one of the facets that connected to this, which is either the positional authority versus the relational authority. And when somebody comes to us, let's say we have an open door, they come, they want to offer a suggestion, and it's different than what we have been doing, or it's a change, or it's maybe even critically thinking about something we've been doing. It's easy for us to get into that defensive position. And then when we maybe feel challenged, then we slide back easily into that positional authority place. Well, we do it that way because I said so, because I'm the boss, right? I mean, how many times do I wish I said that, or want to say that? And then I go, okay, wait a minute, though. I'm trying to do something different here, right? And so then I got to lean back and I got to, okay, now what would it mean for me to lean in here with some of my own curiosity, right? And that is a part of what helps to reinforce that openness. I love the fact that there's a few of you that talked about the body language. How many of you have noticed how difficult this is even in the Zoom platform? The body language piece. I have been in Zoom meetings, and I will just say this as a confession, as opposed to some other observation thing, right? I'll say it as a confession. One of the things that Zoom has unfortunately done for me is it's made me feel like I have permission to do other things in a meeting that if I were in the room with those people, that I would never be working on if I was in the same room with them. And it's related to this attention idea, right? That it's like, oh, it's easy for me just to like go check my email because they can't really tell what I'm doing, right? They can't, you know. And but boy, I am noticing that about myself at times where it's like I will let myself be somewhere else. Oh, wait, no, I actually want to be present here. This is where I want to be. And how much does that play in even into a setting like this when it's just so easy to go, oh yeah, look at that. Oh, what? Let me watch this cat video while there's a, you know, meeting happening or whatever, right? It's good. And you all are familiar with the power of the reflective listening tool, right? You all know what that is, where I feed back to you what I think I hear you saying before I actually respond to it. Powerful, powerful tool of helping to create an open feeling, an approachability factor. Yeah, so good.
Did you catch what Bridget just texted in there or put in
Oh
the
yeah,
chat?
I see that.
There?
Admitting your own mistakes. Yes, for sure. That's so good. Being vulnerable yourself, right? Now, Bridget, you're almost into the, you know, back in the preaching world when I was doing that on a regular basis, I would say, sometimes I go from preaching to meddling. You're almost in meddling mode now, Bridget. That's like, because that applies in like places like parenting and see that I'm not sure. Yeah. Well, thank you for that, but that stings a little too close to home this morning. Yeah, it's good. And I love Mandy's idea there of both learning and teaching in every conversation. That's so good. So good. Love it. All right, let's keep going or we're going to run out of time, which is awesome. We're having a great discussion together. All right. So we're trying to make our culture safe. We're trying to make our culture open. And then the third facet I would say is I think it's important for us to make our culture harmonize. Now, my first question here is, what do you think the difference is between unity and harmony? And why would that be an important thing for us to maybe find a distinction in?
Can I answer again?
Please, yes. There is no rule about how many times.
I would say unity. When I think of unity, it's together, like togetherness, and then like you're together, you're unified. But harmony, you don't necessarily have to be together or agree, but you create this sense of peace within it. And I had in our strategic plan once, I had work-life balance. And when I was sharing it with one of our champions, he was like, wait, you're never in balance between work and life, but you can create a harmony, even if you're not quite in balance. So I was just thinking, good. Yeah.
That's awesome. Cool.
And I would add to.
Oh, go ahead.
We always start at the same time, Katie. Go ahead, Katie.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Hi, Eloise. Thank you. Okay, so I would just add to what Bridget said is just the differentness of people. We all have these giftedness or talents, but we also have these personality differences. And harmony means taking that into account. Yes. That we will go forward with our differences, yet being happy with the style of our differences.
So good. Yeah. Go ahead, Eloise.
And I'm the black sheep because I don't see the difference.
Got it. Okay. Got it. So for me, the idea here, and some of this is because, you know, growing up as a kid, I played music and sang and, you know, did a whole bunch of that kind of stuff. So unity in the musical world is about unison, where everybody's singing the same notes and we're all exactly at the same spot. Harmony, we're each bringing different components, and yet we're all contributing to make a beautiful piece of music. And so for me, that's, again, it's just definition. You might, you know, you could go about this in different kinds of ways, but for me, this is an easy way for me to think about this idea of celebrating differences, of recognizing that somebody on my team might do a job differently than I might do it. And that doesn't actually mean that the way they do it is wrong because they're doing it different than me. So it's allowing for individuality, it's allowing for uniqueness, and yet also as the leader then helping us recognize that even in our differentiation, even in the different strengths that we bring to the table, we're still all working together toward the same thing. We're working with each other, headed in a common direction with one another. Is that helping?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I like John picked up on the music thing too. Appreciate that, right? Complementary strengths serve the same goal. Good. Now we talked about vulnerability a little bit when we were talking about the openness, but I think vulnerability is a key factor in this one as well. So wonder what you think what role vulnerability plays in helping to create this idea of harmony in the process of the larger picture of cultivating withness.
Well, I know for me that, very seldom do I enjoy in a conversation where I know there's going to be conflict. I know there's differing opinions. So if I'm willing to start out with opening myself up to people in that place of either need or asking, wanting to understand other people, it kind of softens that environment if I know that there are people that want to share their view or are holding back their view. There has to be this space where that sense of being open and vulnerable on a leader's part. I have to be willing to be there rather than coming in strong, which just shuts everyone down.
Yes,
and there isn't necessarily, you don't even know if there's harmony.
Right. Yeah. If we come in more from that place of that positional authority, and again, there are times when that's important, right? Where we're needing to use that in a key way. I think though, those times are actually minimal when we want to use that positional authority. But if we're going to come in with that relational authority and we're coming in with a perspective that says, I want everyone here to have voice. I don't just want you to have to get in line with what I am saying, right? That's another way I think of describing what it is that you're talking about. That means I have to come with a sense of vulnerability that says, I'm willing to bring myself, but I want to also let you bring your full self into this space too. And that means I have to give room for you to do that. Yeah, so good.
Yeah, John's going back to the music metaphor. Really good,
Sure.
Just to say, we all might hit the wrong note once in a while, even as a leader admitting that happens.
So good.
Yeah, good.
So good,
John.
yeah. Yeah, that's almost, he's almost in that meddling realm there too. Again, that's, yeah. But it's so true, isn't it? Oh, my word. Okay, now I do want to ask another question here that I think is might be helpful for all of us to talk through a little bit. And we alluded to this a little bit in the openness, but it also impacts this harmony piece. And ultimately, it's a part of this whole withness conversation. And that is this. How do you decide what is an appropriate amount of vulnerability as a leader? And how do you decide what's too much vulnerability as a leader? I'm really love to have some dialogue around this together a little bit. Teach one another.
Well, I'd love to speak up again about this because I think I've been with Hope Kids for 14 years, and I have learned so much about that. And we're a small team of 2 to 3 people. And it gets so easy to just look at your team as, together, we're a team, we're planning events, but our personal lives mesh a lot. And so I've really learned with my new team that I have now on board with us that, I need to set those healthy boundaries where I'm not going to, share like, oh, I'm having this issue with my children, because then that creates a heavy burden on the team to have to carry. And so just setting those healthy boundaries where it's okay to share and be vulnerable, but use discernment, not dump problems on your team that then they have to have the shoulder to carry along with everything else with all their tasks.
So good. So good. One of the things that I think is critical about what you just brought up to us, Bridget, is that in the process of leading, even though we're trying to create a culture of witness, there are some things that as the leader, I'll borrow your language. They're our burden to carry. They're not the team's burden to carry. And when we can begin to make sure that we're being clear and differentiating that, right, that actually helps make a better sense of witness, because now I'm not putting something on them that isn't theirs to carry, right? Like, for example, sometimes I think a budgeting process maybe might be a really practical kind of example of this, right? Like, there's a sense in which sometimes I'm the person that's what I need to carry as the leader. And I don't want, you don't need to worry about that part of it, so that you can do your job and you can really flourish in the arena that you are. So, and you're not having to worry about the financial whatever of what's happening. And again, that's just a simple illustration of what some of those practical decisions might look like.
Well, and then I've learned to surround myself with other like executive directors and leaders. So that's where I can go. So I've found like another outlet. I can go to, other leaders, whether it's on the Hook Kids team or it's, in the community, my local community, that we can talk through these issues together that I don't have to share with my team. And
so
put that on
great.
them.
That is such good insight. I love it. Yeah, so good.
She said exactly what I was going to say. It's the
awesome.
When she said healthy boundaries, that hit home to me, because that is so important. And then, like she just mentioned, I have connections within the community, because I can't do it by myself. I know I need to talk to other leaders. So
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would add. Okay.
Oh, go ahead, Kathy. Go ahead.
I love what both of you have said, the discernment and then the healthy boundaries. And I would add too, in so much of this, when just to begin the meeting, like you started this meeting with prayer, and that even when those personal things are weighing heavy on us, that we just cast our cares upon the Lord first, and then opened up the meeting or the situation.
So good. So good. Somebody else going to jump in there? Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to point out a couple of the comments that are there.
Good.
Yeah, you've got, just the idea that there are times when if you share something, it can be used against you in a almost in a hostage way for professionally. And I remember even myself going through a season where I shared something that in the culture we were in seemed very appropriate to share, and yet was used against me, and went and got counsel later and saying, that you don't always, even when people are opening the door, there are things that you don't want to share. And that discernment, boy, it takes a lot. It does take effort, because there is a tension you're always managing of vulnerability, openness, and wisdom to know timing and everything. John also says, being vulnerable when it helps address the issue or a situation, but not necessarily if it's not pertinent to the situation. It's
Right.
really helpful, John.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So true. Yeah. It's really good. Really helpful. Fantastic. Oh, Bridget says, we pray during every team meeting. We use a weekly report that gives everyone voice, starting with what we're praising God for and ending with our prayer requests. In the middle, sharing what we're all working on, want the team needs to know. It's helped to keep healthy communication. That's fantastic. So good. Love it. Yeah.
I think too, when it's something that is, maybe it's spiritual or you're struggling, maybe discouragement. I think some of those things, I am making sure I'm cultivating friendships outside of even, in my church, and
Yeah.
where, can you pray for me? I can talk to you there instead of with the people. I don't always want to be talking about my doubts or, whatever it is. Just
Sure.
a fine line there as well.
Very true. Yeah. That's again comes back to that, the criticalness of that discernment process alongside of the vulnerability piece, right? That there's discernment that we have to exercise even as we are exercising vulnerability to make sure that it's healthy vulnerability, that it's not inappropriate. And several of you have already alluded to this as well, that there's a discernment about even individuals on your team, because some people are more safe than others with sharing vulnerabilities from their perspective, right? Like, what are they going to do with this if I share this with them, right? Even if you're trying to cultivate that culture of safety, maybe not everybody's fully bought into that yet, right? And so there's, again, that discernment in making decisions about how we share, what we share, when we share those kind of things, as a way of continuing to cultivate overall that culture of witness. Any other final thoughts on the harmonize piece before
I have a question on the
yeah, go ahead.
Still on that piece. Yeah, we set boundaries. Now, this is the leadership doing this. What about those that our team coming to us really vulnerable, but they're sharing and going really, really deep.
Yeah. So that's one of those times where I feel like you begin to try and have discernment about what you as a leader can do to help support them in their own journey, which sometimes is not being the person that needs to help, right? Sometimes you'll need to refer, or you'll need to say, maybe you need to seek some help from somebody that there is a part of being a great leader, of this art of leading, where you recognize that you aren't always everything to all of your people. Does that make sense in answering that question, Eloise?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What else is hanging there for you? I can hear it in your voice. Help me more.
I think I'm thinking more or less on a personal note from that person. They're telling me all their family issues.
Okay.
Which you want to listen, you want to be an ear, but they're going off track. Has nothing to do with the cultures. That's what I'm referring to.
And that's one of those times where, in terms of that safety and making a decision that says, sometimes we have to say, well, here's what the boundaries are for conversations that we're going to have at work. And that those aren't the kinds of things we're going to do here. Doesn't mean that they're not appropriate in some other spaces, right? But you do that in a way that isn't shaming, right? And that isn't in front of others when you want to help set that boundary for them. Because, we do have people that they'll just overshare, and they go, they bring out all their dirty laundry and hasn't even been in the washer yet to hang out on the line. And, it's, you know what I mean? We have all experienced that. And that, in some ways, our ability to gently help set that boundary with them as the leader, because if they're doing that with you, you have to imagine what they're saying to other people too.
Exactly.
So that's one of those times where helping to reinforce a boundary actually helps to cultivate a safe culture for everyone.
Okay.
Yeah. It's good. Really good. Thanks, John. We appreciate that. You just said in the chat he had oatmeal for breakfast. That's awesome. Oh my gosh, that is so
So did I,
perfect.
John.
That is amazing. Okay, so I want to highlight one more small piece with you all that I don't always get to do. When I engage with this kind of material, if I'm particularly in a business or non-faith-based setting, I can't bring in this final piece, but I'm really excited I get to bring this piece in with all of you. And that's just to highlight one reality here. This is not an idea that comes out of nowhere. I would suggest to us that and you'll have to just forgive the geeky, you can't take the pastor, you can maybe take the pastor out of the pastorate, but you can't take the pastoring out of the pastor. So I will always be a nerd theologian, whether I want to be or not. But all of this is rooted in our theological understanding of the incarnation. That ultimately what God did when God came to us in Jesus the Christ is he was the brilliant demonstrator of what withness really is. He came and said, let me meet you on your turf. Let me come be with you where you are. Let me communicate to you that we are in this together. Let me create a culture of safety. When you understand the nuances of the various backgrounds and the diversity of just the 12 disciples, unbelievable that they even could be in the same room together, let alone be on a mission together, right? And yet, how much do we see in his life an example of creating safe space for people that never, ever had safety in their life before? Think about the woman caught in adultery as an example, and we could name Zacchaeus as another. We could just go on and on, right? Openness of real dialogue of, what does this look like? How many times do we see examples of he'd tell a parable, then when he was with his disciples, he'd say, okay, let me help you better understand what this is, right? And then the harmony of saying, okay, Peter, I'm not asking you to be Andrew, and Matthew, I'm not asking you to be John. I want each of you to be your unique, beautiful selves as we move forward together into this mission of the kingdom of God together. So it's really fun that in this setting, I get to be able to highlight that this isn't some idea that that just comes out of books somewhere or my brain or any of that kind of stuff. This is actually something that's rooted in the very fabric of creation itself and in the very incarnation of who God is in Jesus. Final thoughts about any of this so far, and then I have one last question for you.
Nothing right now in the chat.
Awesome. Okay, great. So when I attend stuff like this, often what happens to me is I think, oh boy, this is all really good ideas. I hope you're all thinking this is really good. But I go, oh yeah, now I got to figure, and then I sort of lose sight of it because I feel like it's all just so great. So here's what I would like to give you permission to do. As you think about these three sub-ideas of safety, openness, or harmony into the larger idea of cultivating a culture of witness, which one of these three pieces resonates with you the most this morning? And what is just one very practical step that you could take to implement that in your environment in this next week? And I'd love to hear from one or two of you, whether that's verbally or in the chat, what it is that already has come to your mind of, oh, you know what? I actually need to do this practically this week in order to begin to continue cultivating this kind of culture.
Well, in this is going to defy not oversharing, but
Okay.
I'm almost toying with oversharing.
It's okay. We already know John had oatmeal, so it's all good.
No, I just thought of one particular situation with
Sure.
someone on our board that we didn't really have a disagreement, but just, I was really, the approachableness. I want to go back and just kind of, maybe even touch base with her and say, ask her opinion. Was I approachable in this one situation? So I want to make sure I'm thinking, how am I responding to these things instead of jumping into, this is how I see it.
So brilliant. So
yeah.
good. I love it. Jeff says in the chat, asking my team simply how they're doing on a personal level rather than just an organizational level. Yeah, really good. Like it.
The idea that's rolling around in my head is this idea of harmonize. And the thing that's sticking in my head is how a couple of team members, and I don't want to divert the discussion here, but they had the kind of the idea of equity is maybe equal to unity.
Yes.
But that's not what we're after. We're after harmony. We're after alignment. We're after accomplishing the same thing rather than everybody working the same, even the same hours, all that kind of thing. That's not what that means. Harmony means we're all working together in the same way, but recognizing the differences.
Yes, so true. Yeah. One of the things that's really, John, I'm assuming that was you because I couldn't see the little box that.
Yeah, sorry, that's me, John.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. One of the things that's interesting in that idea too, John, is introducing the concept to them and then inviting them to actually think with you possibly about how they each can bring their unique strengths into the larger purpose of how you're all working together. Inviting them into even that brainstorming process of what would it look like for us to actually do that? Yeah, so good. Yeah, love it. Okay.
This is theme one for me.
Is it harmony?
Yeah, it's harmony. I
Good.
think the starting place for me is in thinking about harmonizing is saying, start my conversation with curiosity. And then I love what you just added is then inviting people, let's think together. So anytime where there's that differing opinions, it's curious. And then let's do more of this together in an invitation.
Yeah, love it. Yeah. Minnie says harmony resonates the most. Their team's very diverse, experience, age, life stage. Right now, I'm kind of at a loss how to do that where everyone is included, but thank for lots to think about. Good. You're very, very welcome. Absolutely. When there is a lot of diversity on a team, harmony becomes even more interesting and sometimes hard to achieve. It's really, really, that is a challenge, Minnie, for sure.
So good.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yep, good. So helpful to stir these things in our mind as leaders. It's easy to be focused on the most immediate things that are in front of us, the tasks, the projects, the demanding. These are things that are so critical. We know many of them, but taking time to think deeper and to be practical about it, so helpful. So thanks for sharing today and for offering these sessions. We really want to encourage you to take advantage of, going deeper as a leader to build this kind of stuff. This is excellent. Yeah, great input today from everyone. We could do that a lot more often and learn from each other. So there's a book that got added. So thanks to everyone. Enjoy, have a great rest of the day. And Steve and I will stay on if anyone has some additional questions you wanted to ask. We'll just sit here for a little bit. So have a good day.